The next fly, classic, is a Parachute Adams. I think the best size for a parachute is actually a 14. For tying purposes, I mean a 16. For tying purposes, we'll do a 14. Makes it a little easier to see. So that's a 14 hook. The Adams is really one of the legendary flies. I don't know who Adams was, but the real Adams is still a good fly, which is a classic Catskill fly. But the parachute version, whether it's a black or white parachute, doesn't make much of a difference. It's all going to be a beautiful thing. The materials for the Parachute Adams are going to be calf tail again for the wing, and you could use either the white, and we know about the black parachute for the white glare on the water. To make life easier for a Parachute Adams, the hackle we'll use will be a Cree neck. Cree necks are a little bit more expensive, but it saves you using two different hackles, because a Cree is actually a combination of a brown neck and a grizzly. So if you don't have that available, actually the new necks, I shouldn't be lazy, but inside we have the long hackles, and those are the ones that are the best for this particular fly. The ones they sell, they're like long midge saddles, and different saddle hackles work very well for parachutes. I particularly like them. Okay, and now we have the thread. When the thread comes out between flies, that's a particular pain in the tushy, especially when your eyes get older. Okay, when we get that through, of course, by the way, if you're not a good sucker, there is a thread puller that you can buy for around $2. In this case, we're going to again tie the parachute, but I do like to put a little bit of coating on the shank, not as much as usual. And we'll tie a white parachute.
Can you take your sunglasses off?
My what glasses?
Your sunglasses.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
These are my fishing glasses. Those who notice have magnifiers to see at night. See anytime. Okay, here you really don't have to be fussy. You really don't need to do much, because I actually cut most of the parachutes. So I'm going to take a little clump. I always, by the way, my sons like to cut these in the middle. You should always cut at the base, no matter what, even if it's going to be long. And frankly, if you want to be economical, you could use like one this long twice. I waste materials. Okay, so it really doesn't matter with a parachute how long you make it, because we're going to cut it. I at least do, because it really doesn't matter. So we're going to leave nice amount of space. In this case, going to go and I tie it same as before for a Royal Wolf, 4 or 5 turns, and then I go over a 6, 8. I'm not stingy. I want it to hold. I lift it up. I almost go almost high, and then I start to, again, I never just want to put them right there. I go back a little bit, back and forth, and then I really sock it at an angle. You'll do that with a Comparadun. That helps it stand. Then go up to the front to taper it, because it will lay your hackles better. Okay? And now we got it standing up. Now in this case, again, I'm going to do it pretty abrupt, because you'll see it's important to taper the body. All right, and I will taper it a little bit by cutting some of the fibers here. So as you go to the back, and this is really delightful outside, you just fling feathers all over the place. Now, I hold up. This is important. So with a parachute, just like you'd wrap, you want to build this up. So I go, that stiffens it up, and then I go down, and I'll lock it in place with one behind. So you got that? Right? So that's a very nice trick. And a real tire will have like Zap-A-Gap, or you can put a little drop of lacquer there, and that stiffens it, because when your quill's going around, it'll hold it better. Now I'm going to go to the back. Now you notice it's very abrupt from here to here, right? So I could fill it with thread to make it taper, but I won't, because the next step, your tail can help adjust that. So which side do we use? The periphery, the edges. Right, we taught that on the first film, number 1, so the same things apply. So here we go. We take our nice little hackles. I have it in my hand. I like the look, right? I can show it down here. you have to learn between your first and second to move things around. You can twiddle it a little bit, makes it straighter. You don't have to stack the tail. I don't think it's that urgent. I'm not that much of a perfectionist. I'm going to lay it down. How long the tail is going to be your personal preference. You know, if you want to really like an emerger, I make a short tail. If you want a little longer tail, like a parachute can imitate a spinner, and you can make a finer tail. So the length of the tail, I really think, is a very personal decision. That's what's nice about fly tying. And I tie it. Now here's where this becomes important. So again, I lock it in tight here, away from the tail, right? And remember, now as I go to the back, now I'm going to let go. I see. And I want to just very loose, because that's going to sort of gather the feathers together. And it can be loose, and then I can lock it with a tight one there. And that's a nice tail, okay? Now this wing obviously is much too long, but it can stay long for now. Now I cut that tail section. Now look how it created a taper, right? So now it goes from front to back. It's very important for all flies, because you want it to be cigar shaped. To really taper it now we're going to apply the dubbing. And the best way to do the dubbing is to go start more towards the eye of the hook. And then you have your dubbing. And again, the dubbing is very important. This is rabbit fur, and it's not great because if you look at it, the dubbing, these are called guard hairs. See those? And that's not great when that's in the dubbing, because you really don't want the guard hairs. It makes the fly a little too buggy. You know, so you really want to pick dubbing if you buy it, like rabbit fur or whatever. That's a little. This is a rabbit gray, and Adams is a gray fur. We didn't introduce the materials for the fly. I'm sorry, but the gray fur is important. When you're dubbing, you hold it in your left hand, and now I put out a lot about this much thread, because I want to dub it. And the key to making a nice dub, frankly, is to wrap it on, lick gently your fingers, and I twiddle in a clockwise direction. And I'm going to try to do the same amount every place. So don't try to taper the fly with putting more dubbing on one spot. So if you keep the dubbing pretty even on this, you'll be able to do it. I'll show you. That's why we start towards the eye of the hook. And I'm just pulling out a little bit more thread. I can always take the dubbing off or add on. So now, because I'm starting here, I'm actually, to get back, I go back to the back, right? And that's enough dubbing. I don't want to make it too thick. And then in the front, I'll have doubled it so it's a little thicker towards the front of the hook. I actually could have tapered it even a little bit more. Could have been a little thinner in the back. But that's fine. It's a nice beefy little fly. We're not done with dubbing with the parachute, but now we have to tie in our feather. Again, if you're going to do a classic, you do a brown and a grizzly. Why don't we do a classic? So we have the feather from before. It's a nice small one. And again, you can make it bigger or smaller. As far as the distance around, how far, it's personal preference. If you look, that's going to be about right. How far it extends over the eye, you know, in a parachute fly. And again, look at the hackle carefully. I don't know, can you see it? You can see that it's always wider here. They taper, so you may as well, to be consistent, pull your hackles back like this. So we're going to do sort of a classic. I'll use 2 hackles. Even though this is a Cree, it would be better if this was a grizzly, which is really gray and white, but this is sort of, on its own, could be a classic parachute Adams. But I'm going to pull a hackle off. Again, the sizing, you can see I always look, I'm looking at the feathers. You know, if it's not perfect, it's okay on a parachute Adams, because I don't think it makes that much difference, as long as it's not too big. It's windy now we got an issue. Okay, so I prepare this hackle. Again, same thing. I pull off the hackles. We talked about convex, concave in our last video. So the shiny side convex, dull side concave. We always put the shiny side towards me. I tie it on my side of the hook, just like before. I'm going to do 3 turns, 3 or 4 turns behind. Then I'm going to do 3 or 4 turns in the front. I have plenty of room. Look at all that room, guys and gals. Whoever's tying, plenty of room. Clip it. Okay, now the parachute has to go over some more dubbing, so we have to dub a little bit now in front. Alright, so we're going to take a little dubbing. Wet your lips. I always hold it in my left hand in front of me. I grab it out and I twiddle. I twiddle it. Not too much spit, by the way. You need very little spit. You really should have, by the way, you should wash your hands. Not because I'm worried about germs, but sometimes, like if you're using a fine light dubbing, you'll get the discoloration. So now I'm going to build up. Now here is important. I'll go behind like a figure of 8, and I'm going to build up a little bit more. I want a little bit of bunch, because you want it to be like a, if you look at an insect, they're always fat in the thorax, which means chest. So I'm putting it a little bit more right in the front. Again, that's going to make, notice how this stood up. Our wings stood straight up when I piled the hackle up in front of it. And now I'm going to take the hackle, and I'm using my fingers as the pliers. Gary, my brother, likes to wind counterclockwise. I classically tie, it doesn't make a difference. And don't be afraid to pull it. And almost every time you're doing it, always try to go lower and lower if you can. See, now it unwound. That's a common problem, all right, because it may not be stiff enough. But when you do it, try to go lower. And I sort of angle the hackle down when I'm doing it. I go down as I'm pulling it. I'm always pulling it in a down, not just around. And that's enough with the first hackle, because I know I have another one. So you don't want to kill it with too much. And here's the hardest part of a parachute, because here I have to tie it, and yet I still have to go underneath the parachute hackles. So the first ones are tougher. Once I get one on it, lift up your parachute hackles with your finger, and then go 1 or 2 more. And then you cut that edge, right? Like I said, try to use your glasses, make sure you cut it. And you may have some extras you have to cut later. So now I'm going to do the second hackle, same thing. I go around. This hackle is a little bigger, but there we go. 3 is enough. I hold it down. See what I'm doing? I'm holding that hackle downward so I get a good angle. I'm seeing my thread go over the eye. Hold it down. I got it. Now once I have it, I lift those up so I can see what I'm doing. Because now I can put 3 or 4, because now the fly is pretty much finished. So I lifted the parachute part. Now I have the hackle in my hand. I got to cut that, right? So I cut that very carefully. Usually if you're blind like me, you'll cut the what do you call it, by mistake. If there are a few hairs there, get them out of your way, because that's going to be a pain when you go to put the eye on the hook later. You tie it on tonight. And now again, have another glass of wine. Now, obviously that wing's ridiculous, so here's where you, like Joe the Barber always said, don't cut off too much to start, take a look. And now I like to, instead of cutting it abruptly, it's still a little long for this fly. You know, if you're really blind, you want it longer, but that gets in the way. The fly won't ride right. So then we taper it down. I sort of cut it at an angle. That's not bad for that fly. So that's a nice parachute. We already have tied it. We tie three more knots, 3 half hitches. We never lacquer it because we're going to lose it fast as it is. And we're done. Cut it. Got another beautiful one. Now, one of the tips we said before, when you tie flies, always have a container available that your kids can't get at, okay? So that you can put them in a box, because flies like to get lost on fly tying tables. And so we have 2 classic flies that we can use. Now, what I recommend to everybody, when it hits 5 after 4, sun's starting to lower, we had a few drinks, now's the time to use your flies.